Hello, I'm back. Today I'm gonna talk to you about the Wuthering Heights movie. I watched it last week on Valentine's Day, which is the concept of releasing a Wuthering Heights movie on Valentine's Day is insane. Regardless, I watched it on Valentine's Day and had a bummer of a time. Okay, so this is the thing about me, right? Is that if I see something that a lot of people really hate, my immediate impulse is to love that thing or to root for it. When I saw that this movie was being met with so much vitriol, like before it even came out, my immediate response was to defend it or at least to sort of root for it and to try to find out some of the reasonings behind the choices that Emerald Fennell was making. And I even sort of defended it in my previous video where I said that it's a tale of the absurd and the gothic and the shocking, and Emerald Fennell is really leaning into that. So that's why she's doing all of these things with the promotion and everything, and being a bodice ripper, having it be really sexual. So when I was going into the movie, I sort of was expecting a really sexual, obviously kind of absurd gothic movie, like very exaggerated gothic tale, which is would have been good, and it was good to an extent. So I'm gonna get into that in a bit. The first, I would say, hour, maybe like 30 minutes to 1 hour of me watching that movie, I was actually really impressed. I was impressed with how well they were able to portray domestic abuse. I was really impressed with the sort of specific brand of domestic abuse that they were portraying in this movie, specifically this like narcissism that is very infantile in nature. Usually what I see in movies that portray domestic abuse, especially parental abuse, is where the abuser is kind of like this villainous person who just sort of like hates their children, or they're just like a really terrible person who is kind of like a cartoon villain. Obviously, the dad in this movie was also a terrible person, but in a different way. I think that a lot of the time, this type of abuse is overlooked, and this type of personality of an abuser is overlooked as well. That scene where Catherine and Heathcliff miss the dad's birthday and he completely flips out and just starts abusing them, that, like, the way that that was acted and the way that that was written and shot, I thought was really wonderful and very thought like emotional, provoking, I guess. Like it was very like it provoked an emotional response in me, and I think a lot of other people. So I thought the way that they were able to portray that emotional abuse and physical abuse, domestic abuse aspect of Wuthering Heights was actually really well done. I also thought that the way they portrayed the way that this abuse and trauma impacts these individuals and how they're so broken that they can no longer fix themselves and they can no longer figure out their own relationship, their own identities, and their own relationship in regards to each other. I thought that was really great. Honestly, hand on heart, I really did not think it was that bad. I also loved the set design. I thought Wuthering Heights itself, the perfect like doom and gloom of it and the horror of it and the horror of what they had to endure inside of it, I thought was really well established in the set design, and it was almost like cartoonishly evil. It was very exaggeratedly gothic. I loved that. I loved how when the father dies, he's surrounded by these ginormous mountains of bottles that he drank. It's very, very exaggerated and very gothic in nature. I love that. I thought that was very well done, and I thought it showed a lot of understanding of Wuthering Heights. To an extent, I think that the movie overall showed an extent of like understanding of Wuthering Heights. I just think that it wasn't very effective in a lot of other ways. My critiques: I have never seen another Wuthering Heights adaptation ever in my entire life. This was the first one. In the movie, we don't follow the children, like the next generation. Like, I understand why this choice was being made, but at the same time, the reason that I think this choice was a little bit of a flop is because Wuthering Heights, to a large extent, is about cycles of this generational trauma that Catherine and Heathcliff both endure and then replicate onto their children. Because there were no children involved, this story kind of went from being a story about domestic violence and how it impacts people and the trauma that they carry and how they perpetuate this cycle of violence to a story about a very doomed love affair, which also is exacerbated by the copious amounts of sex scenes in this movie. Oh my god, so many sex scenes. Holy shit. I thought they were never gonna end. And that, honestly, that more than anything else took me out of the movie so much. The minute that they started hooking up, I was like, I'm done, actually. The reason for that was because the book is quite intense and tense and almost sexy, but in a way where the sexual tension is never resolved. And because, or at least explicitly, right? And because it's never explicitly resolved, we feel it and we feel the yearning and we feel how badly they're messed up because they cannot act on their yearning. In the movie, because the sexual tension is resolved, we sort of lose that catharsis, or at least I lost that catharsis. I didn't cry at the end, obviously, because I knew what was going to happen, but also because I just really didn't feel connected to them. I could see why other people cried, but in my opinion, people that have read the book, I don't think they would have cried, at least that I can understand. Like, I don't really see how it can hit you that hard, because to me it actually failed at punching me really hard in the stomach. I also was not a huge fan of the soundtrack overall. Unfortunately, Charlie XCX's soundtrack for the most part kept taking me out of the story, except for that first song, House. Oh my god, that song, coupled with the visuals and the terrifying like hanging scene, and then we go from that to like this grotesque, like very gothic, like people making out, to like the moors and then the hair, like that was crazy. I loved it. I absolutely adored it. Also, some of the visuals as well were really stunning. Like the costumes in the first half before she gets married to Linton, I thought were actually quite fun. I saw the vision, like I understood what she was going for with the, I don't appreciate it, but the bodice ripper kind of like costumes, I get it. I disagree with the vision, but I see the vision, I guess. Then, especially the one where she walks in like the pool of blood and she's covered in blood in the dress, I thought that was cool. Her like corsets and stays were really cool, I thought, in the first half. That red, I really like that red cloak. But overall, the second half, especially after she gets married to Linton, I hated those dresses so much. Every time I saw them, I just kept being taken out of the story. It was just absolutely terrible. The plastic, I could feel it with my fingers. That dress that everybody clowns on, I unfortunately also have to clown on it. I hated that dress so much. It looked like she was wearing a cellophane bag. This very dark black dress that like kind of shimmers and it almost looks like a mirror. I hated that dress so much. It looks like oil slick, but like I just hated it. I hated it. Overall, this is the consensus that I came to. Emerald Fennell's movies, Saltburn and Wuthering Heights, I could see that Emerald Fennell sort of knows about Gothic literature, or she understands the Gothic in theory, and she does these beats and she does these tropes very well. You know, there's the big house, there's the exaggeration, the absurdity. You've got this like passion and obsession. In Saltburn, you've got like the homoeroticism and you've got the elitism, right? So you've got these tropes and you've got these like beats of the story that it would normally have. But then When I think about them a little bit deeper, I come up with nothing. And I've seen this critique before as well from people that it just feels empty. It feels void of any sort of moral of the story conclusion that I'm supposed to be drawing. It does these like visual cues and it tells you, like, this is a gothic story. Look how well I can do a gothic story. And it shows you Saltburn and it shows you Wuthering Heights, but then it lacks in that depth. I don't know how exactly it comes across as such, but it just really does for me, especially in Wuthering Heights, like with the whole resolving of that misunderstanding, that famous misunderstanding that literally is the entire point of the plot. They resolve that misunderstanding. She tells him that he didn't hear all and that she actually really loves him, and then they have a bunch of sex, and then Heathcliff's character is completely different. He's no longer abusive, and Isabella is on all fours, barking like a dog. What's up with that? Again, I could see that it was supposed to be like shocking, but to me it just fell into the ridiculous rather than the shocking. Or with something like Saltburn, you know, we have this compelling story, like an interesting story, but then we have this guy, they have absolutely no history at all. For some reason, he decides to stalk this other random guy. They're both wealthy, like one of them is middle class, the other is obviously absurdly wealthy, but I recently actually rewatched Saltburn before Wuthering Heights just to see if maybe the hype would be there again, and it really just wasn't for me. Unfortunately, after I finished the movie, I was just, again, I felt really empty. I felt like, yes, I just saw a gothic movie. Yes, it had all these tropes, but other than the tropes, like the tropes have to be communicating something. They have to be saying something. And for me, they really didn't. Like, when I think of a successful, effective gothic movie, I think of something like The Witch with Anya Taylor-Joy by Robert Eggers. Even something like The Lighthouse. I've actually not seen that one, but it looks very gothic to me. The point I guess I'm trying to make is that you can have an adaptation that's not book accurate, and you can also have an adaptation that is interested in sort of interrogating the text a little bit more. This adaptation didn't really do that. You can also have an adaptation that is maybe more interested in leaning into like the shocking and the gothic, while at the same time, again, just having a little bit more depth. I appreciated that emphasis on the blurring of the lines between violence and sexuality. I really appreciated that because that's a big theme in Wuthering Heights as well. But then again, like the sexuality just sort of overpowered the violence, and at the end there was really no violence at all because we didn't really see them being abusive towards other people, really. I think that overall this movie succeeded in what it was trying to do in the first hour, at least, where it was trying to replicate a reading experience of reading Wuthering Heights, and I think it actually did that successfully. Again, like the first hour of the movie, I'm really not gonna criticize it very much at all because I really enjoyed it, actually, and because I think that it was quite successful in that. But overall, I was underwhelmed, to say the least. I was almost considering not making this video because I was just kind of like, I'm over it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. If you want to see more videos about Gothic literature or just English literature in general, sometimes books, I sometimes post about books that I read. Please consider subscribing. And also let me know if you actually want to see more book content or if content about classic English literature is more interesting to you, or whatever themes you want me to cover. Like, I got a comment the other day that wanted me to cover more types of abuse in books and movies, and I think that's a really cool idea. If there's anything else you want me to cover, let me know. All right, thank you.